Hey, yeah, good morning. It is Tuesday morning, or maybe very early on Tuesday morning, or sometime on Tuesday. It's that time of the week. For those of you who I saw, I think I saw a couple of you, Anna and Gloria, and some others out at the powwow this weekend. We had a great time. Thank you so much for coming out. Washington, for coming out and helping out. I'm pretty sure that we had record numbers all the way across the board. Um, in attendance and feeding people. So it was a great time. I was very tired on Sunday, but it's always a fun event. And it's always nice to see how well it's attended. Uh, Moving on though, we are now in week 15 of the course. It is a beautiful day outside. It's Monday when I'm recording this, and the weather is absolutely fabulous. I realize that it is extremely hard to concentrate on your work for this semester, especially if it's an online class. But if it's time to sort of hang in there and grind it out to the very end of the course. This is week 15. We will also have a week, let me make sure. I know I have a week 16, and then there's also a finals week, okay? Let me make sure. I will be sending some other, excuse me. Come on, wrong one. Wasting time here, wasting your time and mine. Yeah, like you'll have week 15, week 16, and then finally on the finals week. Let's see, let me make sure where I'm headed here. All right, cool. You're gonna have for week 15. We're gonna start turning to read. I think it's one of the most fabulous long poems ever composed in the English language. We're going to be reading Simon Ortiz's From Sand Creek. It's a long poem. It's also a poem of vignettes. It can be read. Each poem could be read separately. I'll leave it up to you as to how you choose to read it. A little bit of background. You will have a couple of videos to watch for this week. One is a longer documentary from the Colorado Experience, the Colorado Public Broadcasting System, put out what I think is an extremely powerful documentary about an extremely tragic event that happened in Colorado. We're talking about me. I always struggle with trying to sort of explain exactly what to call this event. It's been called a massacre at Sand Creek. That's one way to put it. I think for contemporary, in our contemporary language, I think we would call this an act of terrorism. That's the words I think that we use to define these types of actions. In 1864, in southeastern Colorado, Cheyenne and Arapaho people were basically murdered on the fields. And I'll let you watch, by an illegal posse. Or illegal posse of Colorado volunteers, of citizens in Colorado. This was not a U.S. military action. This was not an action that was sanctioned by the U.S. military. This is not an action that was sanctioned by the President of the United States. This was an act of terror by an armed group against another group of individuals. And I think it's important to remember that as we think about how this literature that we read, how we reading contemporary American Indian literature, and that literature which is set or talks about events from the past or those traumatic events from the past, how to live with that. I think it's always important to contextualize and to understand that much of what we deal with in the world today is not that radically different than what the world has been living with for a very long time. So killing people is nothing new. Killing people in mass is nothing new. I know that we like to believe that we as societies and we as a world have evolved, but we're oftentimes struck with these reminders that we haven't really evolved that much. But what we get here with Ortiz's work, I think, is some of the most beautiful writing on this type of trauma that I think that we'll ever see. And it's an extremely unique book in that Simon Ortiz writes this work while recovering as a veteran Ortiz served in Vietnam in the early years from 62 to 64. He didn't see, in the early years of Vietnam, but he lived with events from his time in the service and was struggling in his life when he wrote this from the VA hospital in Fort Lyons, Colorado, which is right there at Sand Creek. And for him, this was a very pointed moment. For him, those two links, although Ortiz is from Acoma Pueblo and he is not Cheyenne or Arapaho, being there in a Veterans Administration hospital as a former member, as a veteran of the U.S. Army, that tragic event of 1864 has an effect on his ability to recover in 1960 in the 70s when he's writing this poem. It's about a century apart. It is a balanced perspective, and it's about the struggles of men who live within a violent society, and it's about the struggles of men. It's about the struggles of soldiers. It's about the struggles of veterans. It's about the struggles of particularly American Indian veterans who have come back from war and are trying to put their lives back together. It is very beautiful, in its sparse language. And what it tries to do is for him, I guess, to resurrect in some ways what it means to be an American. So this is not just a poem for like American Indian vets. This is not just a poem for Simon Ortiz to recover in this hospital. It is very much a poem for how America can recover from itself. The United States of Amnesia is what has sometimes been referred to, and I just heard it again on a Sunday morning political talk show. I think anyway, and I've argued this for a long time, and it was interesting to hear it this weekend, but I've also heard others say this as well. We in this country have a very hard, we practice historical amnesia. We have a very hard time living with our history because it is a brutal and violent and ugly history. Not always, but for the oppressed populations within our culture, and we continue to see this oppression continuing on until today, and the long-lived living with the trauma from those events in succeeding generations, we have a hard time sort of maintaining our attachment to that. We like to forget things of 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 20 years ago, 6 months ago, if we can. And it's an issue, right? And Ortiz attempts to resurrect this moment. And for him, the very survival of the country is in its ability to sort of grasp and grapple with this violent and beautiful history. If the country is ever to recover, this is not only a recovery for Ortiz, but it's also a means for recovery for what he calls America, this dream that he calls America. So you won't be, there won't be a response paper written for this. If the response paper that I'll be grading this week for on Erdrich's Love Medicine, that's your last response paper. So after this, you'll have a final exam, and I will open up that question probably sometime next week. But for this week, you need to read Ortiz, and you need to write about just the poem. There is a secondary article, and Gibbs is this beautiful swirl called America that'll help you, to sort of grasp, to answer the discussion in the journal question. And then you'll also have a discussion in the journal next week, and then you'll have your final exam after that. So to finish the course, you need to read this long poem, read the secondary article, and then you will also be watching a film, Sherman Alexie Smoke Signals, before we get into watching the final documentary that your final exam will be written over. So it's difficult for me to say have fun reading Sand Creek, because I think at times it's difficult reading. But it's not, put it this way, it's less graphic than Fool's Crow was with the Maraniss massacre, but it's certainly, and maybe even less graphic than Erdrich's, some of the scenes in Erdrich, the domestic violence scenes, so, but at the same time, it deals with very sort of traumatic sort of events. The documentary may be a bit more traumatic than the other. But read the book and see what you gain from it. Read the book on your own terms, I guess is what I'm saying. And even though you won't be writing a longer response paper for it, I'd like to see you really sort of put in some strong work in your journal and your discussion board sections over these next 2 weeks. Okay. But take the book on your own terms. I guess that's about the most that I can say about it at this point. Other than that, again, if you're behind in the course, please start turning in your work. I will send out very clear announcements on how late work, you can turn in late work all the way up until the day my grades are due. We'll need to talk. If you want to talk to me, send me an email if you have any questions at all about that. We have options if you're unable to complete all your work, and I'll be in contact with those individuals on an individual basis. Your best bet, though, is to get the work turned in by the date that I set for the final day that I can accept all work for the course, and then my grades will be due the next day. So keep up the good work. If you've fallen behind, get on it and get your work completed. I'm here to help you. I'm here for support. I'm not here to fail you. I'm here to work with you so you can succeed in the course, but you need to reach out to me and talk to me so that we can begin the processes to make that happen. All right, enjoy your week, enjoy the weather, get to work and enjoy the reading, and we'll talk to you next week. Yeah, watch out.